Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, why are Maryland and Virginia taking different roads on auto emission standards? Why is MCPS under a severe budget crisis, and what to do about it? And finally, the 80th anniversary of D-Day, the fall of Rome, and the invasion of Saipan. Are we today worthy of the greatest generation of Americans? Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, and civic activist, Cary Lamari. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. Think about it for a minute. What would your life be like without the internet, indoor heating and cooling, and without a car to take you to a grocery store? Is that our future? It could be, as the war on fossil fuels continues and as politicians keep touting a zero emission future as soon as 2035 without providing the infrastructure to support such ambitious plans. Several reports point out that the growth of artificial intelligence could absorb all of our current electric power generation, and the power centers are turning to fossil fuels to meet the short-term energy demands. This week, Maryland Governor Wes Moore signed what he called one of the most comprehensive executive orders on the climate of any governor in Maryland history. And what was the most significant change? The elimination of gas water heaters and gas furnaces. Mark, Governor Moore has instructed the Maryland Energy Administration to submit plans that will require 100% of Maryland energy needs be from renewable resources by 2035. What a pipe dream.
Well, what's crazy about this is a certain amount of virtue signaling going on, and as opposed to building an infrastructure that's ready and in place. It is highly unlikely that the necessary preconditions are going to be in place for that. For example, under the infrastructure bill that was passed 3 years ago, there was a plan to build to pay for with about $8 billion in money charging stations. Fewer than 100 charging stations have been built with those funds. These changes take a long time. And rather than approach it from a sort of common sense way of what's practical and what's realistic and what's economical, we're approaching this from the perspective of, who can demonstrate that they're the best.
So, Mark, what really is a question is what's achievable? Today, the U.S. Department of Energy issued a definition of what constitutes a zero emission building. It means a building that achieves zero operational emissions from energy use must be energy efficient, free of on-site emissions from energy use, and powered solely from clean energy sources. This is an impossible dream, Cary. But consider this. According to the U.S. Energy Administration, Maryland consumes 5 times more energy than it produces, and renewable energy, including both small-scale generating installations and large-scale generating facilities, provide only 12% of our total state electricity needs in the most recent year surveyed, 2022. Why are we going down this impossible road?
Well, all I can say is there's 2 trajectories. One direction is our desires, our hope to be less reliant on fossil fuels and address the climate change. The other trajectory is, how do we do that? How do we have where's the infrastructure going to come from? And the reality is we are relying on natural gas and fossil fuel electrical generation, and the industry basically is not prepared. I mean, if you want to change gas furnaces to electric furnaces and heat pumps, if you want to create electric vehicle charging stations, if you want to get rid of your lawnmower, you got to charge the electric lawnmowers. It requires power. Now, the industry's trying to meet that goal through energy management, but we're so far away from that, and the cost to the residents that's going to bring is just mind-boggling.
Well, I mean, as implausible as this is, I want to shift gears to talk about electric vehicles, because one of the first things that Governor Moore did when he became governor was to rescind the order from his predecessor, Larry Hogan, regarding the link between California auto emission standards and Maryland emission standards for vehicles. And just the other day, Governor Glenn Youngkin announced that he is removing his state from participating in California's tougher automobile standards that will get even tougher at the end of the year. California requires zero emission vehicles to make up 22% of all new vehicle sales by the end of next year, or pay penalties. Nobody wants to buy these cars. Mark, what do you think about this?
Well, one of the problems we've had with this is we have not had an honest discussion about making this particular change. This was sort of done in the backed into this way with a bill that was passed when Hogan's last year, but it was left the decision to basically regulators to decide to go forward with California. So we never really came forward and say, do you want to give up your auto? This is what it's going to cost. These are what the operating costs are going to be. Here's what's the availability. These decisions have basically been left to regulators and administrators. And I think it is, in fact, generating a considerable level of frustration on the part of citizens who take a look at the consequences of all of this and see an immense affordability gap.
Yeah. So Cary, it'd be wonderful to be in a zero emission world, but consumers prefer hybrids 3-to-1 over electric vehicles. They love their cars. When will the legislators figure that out?
Well, I mean, the reality is, take buses. 5% of the population over 16 use buses. Yeah, we're expecting all of our growth to be based on that. And that's the problem. We have these wonderful ideals that we want to achieve, but we never address the infrastructure needs that go along with it. There again, those two trajectories. You've got to address the infrastructure needs. You've got to find out how we're going to meet the power requirements, the load necessary for the electric vehicle charging stations, for our home changes in our gas to electric. All of that has to be addressed before we're just not doing it right.
Well, I mean, I think these are all wonderful goals, but I think there needs to be some pushback from the population as to whether these are achievable goals for us going forward. I want to go to the switch gears and go to talk about the school budget, because there's been a lot of discussion over the past 2 weeks. The MCPS announced last week that it was going to have to cut teachers' positions and programs as a result of not getting their fully funded budget. My goodness, the county council funded 99.2% of the Montgomery County school budget for a total of $3.3 billion. And yet the school board is threatening to increase class sizes, lay off 21 employees, and elimination of very popular programs like Virtual Academy. Cary, why all the wailing and gnashing of teeth over minor cuts to the budget?
Why all the wailing? Oh my God. I mean, it goes back to the dysfunction all over again. They got $128 million more than they did last year. $28 million more. The council gave them $28 million more than Mark Elrich's budget. It's insanity. And then we've got the state legislation called maintenance of effort. And that's what destroys the whole thing. I mean, every dime we give to the school system, we've got to give them that or more next year. And if you remember, our enrollment deals with ebbs and flows. our enrollments are actually going to be going down in the coming years, but the budget's going to go up. Unfortunately, we're in that middle ground. And another thing, think about this, the way they're spending the money. $9.7 million settlement for sexual assault, $1.3 million payoff to former Superintendent Knight. The Biederman fiasco. Then this week, we hear about an alleged assault by another school principal. Where's the money going to come from? I mean, that's a big problem.
Well, it's not a question of money, because, Mark, this is an organization that received a 3-year revenue increase exceeding 20%. And it's now claiming that layoffs are warranted.
And the amount that was budgeted for was higher. The percentage was higher than the amount that salaries went up, which is a real head scratcher, because of course the salary costs are typically the driver for the public education. I think Cary sort of touched on one of the key issues. When the budget was originally proposed, was before Monica McKnight had resigned. She has since resigned, and I think we have, forgive me, the B team or the C team in place on Rockville Pike running the MCPS, and they've hit upon this political strategy of threatening layoffs as a way of getting funds. None of this was, the consequences were never expressed when the original budget was proposed by them and then cut, as by Ehrlich and then by the council. So I think we're seeing some budgetary and political gamesmanship on the part of the interim leadership at MCPS.
Well, I think it's interesting to see the muted reaction from the county council. Cary, you got the last word on this.
Wait a second. I mean, the county council is now saying, they're scratching their head saying, hey, we don't have line item veto, and they don't. They're saying that maybe the school system just needs help in developing a plan on how to deal with budgetary problems. So they've contracted the Office of Legislative Oversight and the Inspector General to develop some sort of a report to teach them how to do their own budget. And maybe they should have done that 10 years ago. I don't know. That's the problem.
Well, you would think they had some experienced administrators who knew how to manage a budget under any kind of leadership over the past several years. Mark, any final thoughts?
Well, I think we've touched upon it. I think there's a vacuum right now while they look for a new full-time superintendent, and interim leadership has made some really unfortunate choices. They should be able to budget. They're getting increases. They can certainly fund the agreements that they've reached. There's really no need for the threats that they're making.
Yeah, I find it interesting that the interim leadership is doing this, because usually they don't stick their neck up too high. So when we come back from this short break, remembering the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Stay tuned.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right, because a few hours ago in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign, not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a fourth ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
When I first saw a turtle, my heart was full. Now anything but lonely.
We had this deep connection, this heart connection.
He just wants to be close to you and part of your life.
Every day with Turtle is a perfect day.
When I'm holding her, it makes me feel calmer.
I think everything he does shows how much he loves us.
When we adopt a shelter pet, we discover they're a little bit of a lot of things.
But they're all pure love.
And welcome back. June 6th was the 80th anniversary of the Normandy invasion, which has been called the longest day in our nation's history. While the importance of the Allied invasion into German-occupied France cannot be denied, We should also remember that on June 6th is the longest day for other reasons. World War II was not just about the European theater of action. America was involved in a world war, fighting many foes and military actions that took place all across the globe. In the Pacific, the United States forces began the campaign to take back the Marianas Island chain with the invasion of Saipan. That resulted in nearly 6 months of brutal battle and deadly combat on the seas and on the land. In Europe, the campaign to liberate Italy and drive out German troops culminated on June 6th with the capture of Rome. I think the importance of this day in history is not marked just by the heroic actions that took place that day on the Normandy beaches, and there were many, for there have been many heroic battles throughout world history. To me, the ultimate importance of D-Day and what it symbolizes is it led to the defeat of an evil, tyrannical rogue nation and the transformation of enemies into allies. What do you think is most important about remembering June 6th, Mark?
Well, I think it's just a reminder when we think about what happened in World War II is that our liberty, our freedom is always under challenge, and it comes from unexpected quarters. Only a few years before 1944 was a strong sentiment for isolationism in this country, and then we were obviously faced with the challenge of the Nazis and the Empire of Japan. The need for vigilance, the need for preparation, the need to be able to push back when faced with challenges is a reminder that that's a necessary precondition for our maintaining our freedoms that we cherish so much.
Thank you. Cary, your thoughts?
You know, this brings me back to when my mother was a young lady. May 18th, exactly, 1944. That was her birthday. She lived in a small farm on a mountain just outside of Rome, about 30 minutes outside of Rome. But the story is not about my mother, but about Monte Cassino. That's another mountain, 3 or 4 mountains away from my mom. And one of the biggest battles to take over Italy occurred there. It was a 4-month battle where the Allied forces fought relentlessly to defeat the Germans. The Germans were hovered over top of a monastery on top of this mountain. If you know anything about the Italian landscape, you've got mountains and then a valley. The valley that's adjacent to it today is the Autostrada. The Americans and the French tried to come up through the valley to go to Rome. It took them 4 months. They started in January. They did not defeat the Germans till May 18th. They walked into Rome June 2nd to applaud and cheers. And what we have to remember, this is the epitome of fighting for freedom, to get rid of tyranny, get rid of fascisms, to build a world order, which we enjoy today. We're not there yet, and who knows when we will get there. But the reality is, a lot of brave souls, 54,000 died in Monte Cassino just to be able to open up Rome to democracy.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned the numbers of casualties, Cary. Yesterday was June 6th, and I was listening to the historian for the D-Day Memorial, and besides the numbers of the 175,000 troops that were engaged that day, what really struck me was he said how precarious the entire battlefield was, and that really, if it was really if you boil it down, it was to the essence of maybe 3,000 troops and their leaders that individually took the initiative to fight through and start to achieve their accomplishments, particularly on Omaha Beach, as we all know, which was the bloodiest of the battles of the 5 beaches that were being under attack that day. So individual achievements, and what it reminds me, and as is that Americans, and I say this broadly, Americans have the spirit and the love of liberty, and they will rise to the occasion to meet those challenges on behalf of us all. Ronald Reagan, in his beautiful speech 40 years ago at Normandy, talked repeatedly about how they came as liberators, not as conquerors, and how important that was. Any final thoughts that you all may have?
Well, I think I was thinking of that Reagan speech when we were, and it really was a reference. And I'm struck, obviously, then it was 40 years out, and so many people had died or were, old. And this is this 80th anniversary. There are very, very few people who are left who had that firsthand knowledge. And we are privileged collectively to have been lived among that generation and to have had that vicarious experience that
we were raised by that generation.
We were raised by that generation.
Yeah. Cary, last thoughts.
Bottom line is our parents fought for liberty, for dignity, for self-determination for all people, for a world order. And we can't lose sight of that. With all of what's going on today, we've got to stay true to the ideals that our fathers, not our forefathers, our fathers sacrificed themselves for.
Well,
and
you guys, I know we all share the same sentiments here, that America is still the greatest place on earth to live. Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from this short break.
Hey world, I have a quick message. It's about safe driving. All right, let's go. Anytime you're driving, have the seatbelt buckled tight. Both hands on the wheel and your phone out of sight. When not in your hand trying to text somebody back. Because if you do, your car might get smacked. The moral of the story, just put your phone down. The people on the road will stay safe and sound. Put your phone down, put your phone down. People on the road will stay safe and sound. Yeah.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right because a few hours ago in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign. Not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a fourth ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Now with parting shots, Mark Uncapher.
Our thoughts and prayers goes out to the people who were affected this week by the tornado that struck parts of Montgomery County. Kind of a reminder, we're not in Tornado Alley per se, but we need to always be prepared for the possibility of dangerous weather. I had an experience with this a couple of years ago when a tree hit my house, and you got to be prepared. But it's interesting, as a society, we're very fortunate that the consequences of weather, the number of fatalities has gone down dramatically over the last couple of decades as technology and construction materials and warnings in advance make us safer as a society.
Thank you, Mark. Cary, Lamari, your parting shot.
I agree with Mark, everything he said. But mine's a little more interesting parting shot this week. Casey, COVID is over. But you wouldn't know that if you went to the county offices on anything, or the state for that matter. I had a civic activist contact me the other night. Blew my mind. He's trying to do some research on a rezoning or a zoning application in Glenmont. The hearing examiner's office, he tried to go to contact them so he could use their law library. Guess what? You've got all these automated services. People are still at home. I'm telling you, our county government needs to go back to work. State government, go back to work. COVID is over.
Well, yeah, you would think, Cary, that's a great point. I know we have a minute or two before the show goes off, but You know, Mark, thinking about the technology, you know, they now have technology that can analyze the formation of the clouds and the pressure, the weather pressure, and predict the likelihood of tornadoes. I mean, my family grew up in Western Kansas, and I spent one terrible night in a cellar under the house because of tornado warnings. And I know how devastating it can be. But just think about how blessed we are with the technology. And I'm going to link it back to one of our first topics, energy. We need reliable energy to power our technology so that we can live in a better, safer, more productive world. And with that, I want to thank you both for appearing this week. I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.